something to save his life. And he's a very precious being, not just to me, but actually to the part of the world that values truth and honesty and uh, needs strategic leadership in that area. And so I decided, as much as I do not like going back to the United States because of the politics and because of the lawless constitutionlessness and because of the problems that we have, I decided that his life was more important than my reticence or his. And we hopped aboard a plane, and we're here this past Sunday, a week ago Sunday morning. Now, why did we come to the United States when we're living in Chile? We could have gone any place, or we could have stayed in Chile. There are homeopaths there. There are osteopaths. There are chiropractors. There are acupuncturists. But in my estimation, there are none who are at the level of masterful superiority that is necessary for somebody who was so frail and so ill as General Burt. General Burt lost in a period of weeks approximately 44 pounds, which is cataclysmic. So the first thing we did was to take him to a chiropractor. Now, remember, folks, if you're not familiar with me and with the foundation, you may not know that I am an allopathically trained and licensed physician. I can write drug prescriptions. I can do all kinds of deadly, horrible things. So I decided that the first thing we needed to do was visit a chiropractor who would align the occiput, which is the posterior part of the skull. If you put your hands at the back of your head, just above your neck, your fingers are on the occiput, and the bone that supports it, called the atlas. When those are out of alignment, blood flow to the brain is seriously compromised. Nerve impulses are seriously compromised. So the first thing we did was have an AO, an atlas orthogonal adjustment for him. And that perked him up some. And then we proceeded from there. Now, I have been visiting doctors with him who will give him high potency intravenous infusions. Why multiple doctors? Well, this is holiday just before the Labor Day weekend, and some offices are open for these days and some offices are open for those days. I'm not doctor shopping for OxyContin. I'm trying to get him high potency nutrients from doctors who are whose offices are open those days. And I know these doctors, and they're good guys. And I'm giving him vitamin C and magnesium and manganese and selenium and calcium and alpha lipoic acid and glutathione, and the things that the body and the brain need to thrive. When you're in a state of acute starvation, you don't get those. So that's what we've been doing. And this morning he was, and on Sunday, a guy named Ed Wunder, Wunder, came over saying, I have a machine that will help your husband. It can't hurt him, but allow me to try. And I'm sorry, on Saturday, was it Saturday or Sunday, Ralph? I can't remember. Sunday. And maybe Saturday. And it is a device that uses electrolysis, that's the electrical splitting of water, to create hydrogen bonded H2 and oxygen O2. And as this flows out of the machine, it carries various scalar energies with it. And General Burt responded absolutely magnificently. Frankly, on Saturday morning, it was Saturday. On Saturday morning, I was not sure he was going to be alive for 24 hours more. On Saturday evening, it was clear that he was now going to survive, and now we had the rehabilitation road. Now, what am I waiting for at this point?
Let me break in for one moment and just add my own testimonial to the situation. Dr. Rima and General Burt and I get together every couple of years these days for trustee meetings, and I haven't seen them since we were last in Panama together a couple of years ago. So I was quite surprised to see how emaciated Burt was. And I'm also very pleased to say that I've seen a change in the past couple of days. And in addition to the
Yep.
hydrogen device, you may want to mention the
I was going to,
bioacoustics and
yes.
a few other things. Okay.
We've been doing sound therapy, bioacoustics. We've also, Ralph was kind enough to drive the wilds of New Jersey and bring with him a device simply called the zapper, which creates static charge. Now, many people feel that static charge and vital energy are the same thing. So when
Right.
you zap somebody with crackling static charge, you may be increasing their vital energy. Indeed, we saw some response, not as much as I had hoped, but Ralph needs to come back with his little magic box, of which I believe there are only 12 in the world, right, Ralph?
Exactly. I absolutely will be back. I had to go to Alaska to get that device back in the 1990s, and we've seen some interesting things that confirm to me that if the life force energy of a person is high enough, then most any remedy will work.
Yes, that is true. Now let me take a moment. By the way, we have blogs up about this, what I'm choosing, what we're doing, and progress reports up at our principal website, drimatruthreports.com. And we would love it if you would add your name to the email list, and we'll send you a complimentary subscription to our very important newsletter. But why did I not take him to a hospital? I believe that General Burt has had a small stroke this morning, at which may resolve completely. But why wouldn't I take him to a hospital? Because in the United States and in the UK and maybe in Australia, Vera, you'll have to tell us, um, hospitals are agencies of death for the elderly, the infirm, and the expensive. Something called the Liverpool Pathway was enacted in the UK, and more than 20% of the deaths in the UK in hospital are deaths that are brought about by the doctor deciding unilaterally that this person should no longer inhabit the planet. And the United States, although allegedly there are no death panels and so on, the United States has a very horrifying record of basically whacking old people. General Burt is 86, and I'm not prepared to have him murdered. So there will be no hospital for him.
And
Now,
understand, folks, the Liverpool pathway, which allegedly no longer applies in England, but I've seen articles that say the new one is even worse. This pathway is always presented as the kind and humane thing to do. And it is true that they bring the person home for what's called in home
well, that's
hospice.
that's one way to do it. It's not
Yeah,
always in-home hospice.
that's
It's
true.
that's one pathway.
They bring you in. They bring a hospital bed into your home. They put your body on the bed. A nurse comes along and instructs the family. If you think that your loved one is in pain, please let me know. I will immediately give him a morphine patch. The person tries to take a little water, tries to take a little food. The family is worried because they feel the individual might be uncomfortable. The nurse comes back, slaps on the morphine patch. The person stops taking food and water. 36 hours, 24 hours later, they're dead.
And this goes on in the hospitals as well as at home. And these decisions are made by doctors or others. Very, very frightening. If you think this is a paranoid reality that doesn't have anything to do with your life and the life of those you love, you're wrong. Look up the Liverpool Pathway and see where we are. So General Burt is, we have a magic bullet coming on um, Thursday. Dr. Robert Sorge is one of two licensed naturopaths in the state of New Jersey, thanks to Ralph. And he said, can you get raw, unpasteurized, unhomogenized goat's milk because I have seen cases like this turn around completely with frequent small feeds of this raw goat's milk, organic, of course. And then we began the search of trying to find raw organic goat's milk. There are lots of goat farms in New Jersey. They
And
will
there's
not sell
lots of
raw milk.
fear. And there's lots of
There's
fear.
lots of fear. The federales have created a climate of atrocious fear. And so they would say, nope, nope, not legal to sell it, can't sell it, can't sell it. Well, I asked another doctor if he knew anybody, and he got on the phone, and 4 quarts of raw, unpasteurized, unhomogenized goat's milk will be delivered to me at this doctor's office in Trenton on uh, Thursday. And I will immediately start giving General Burt what I have been assured could be a magic bullet for him, and I will let you know. Now, let's assume that General Burt begins to heal rapidly. Why would that be illegal? Because we don't want people healing, certainly not with milk. Atrocious. So that's the state of my search for General Burt's health. And Ralph has been there cheek by jowl with me. Thank you, Ralph.
My pleasure, Dr. Lima. Bert is
And now,
so important for us.
he is so important and so precious. Now, the show. We have with us 2 guests, 2 amazing women. One comes to us from Australia, and before that from all kinds of other places. That is the remarkable and indefatigable Dr. Veira Scheibner. I will spell her name for you. Vieira and where people are speaking learnedly about the dangers of vaccines and the lies about vaccines and the distortions about vaccines, there you will find Dr. Veira Scheibner right in the middle of the mix. Hello, Veira.
Hello, everybody.
And so glad to have you. And the person who brought you to us today, although we've spoken before, is the amazing Sally Elkordy. Elkordy, and you can see her website and contact information on the live stream. Sally Elkordy is fearless and, like me, lacks social judgment. Right now, she is running for mayor of New York, and her platform is Vaccine Free New York. You will see on the live stream a photograph of Sally probably in front of City Hall, I would guess, saying, call for a national moratorium on vaccination now. www.novaccine.com. And when we asked Sally to be our guest, she said, can I ask Veira to join us? And I said, of course you can. We love Veira, and we do. So welcome, Sally.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on with all 3 of you.
I would like to know what twigged you, Sally, and what twigged you, Veira, to the fact that vaccines are not only questionable, they're damnable.
Well, I guess, Veira, you should go first.
Okay, well, my involvement with vaccines started with a breathing monitor. In October 1985, at a party, I met Leif Carlson, obviously a Swedish name. I always ask people what they do, and when I asked him that question, he said that he was a biomedical engineer specializing in patient monitoring systems. And I have no idea why, but I asked him whether he would develop a breathing monitor for babies. He said, yeah, I think I can do it. Well, 1980s was the time where all those SIDS researchers thought that suddenly tens of thousands of babies are born with inborn breathing control faults. And that's why they stop breathing in sleep and die. They never ask what happened to those babies before they died, They were looking for that elusive high-risk baby, like to get some electronic device, beam it at the forehead of a newborn baby, and it will tell us this is a high-risk baby. And so it is, as you see, a total nonsense. Well, it took a year and a day exactly from that memorable evening when we met with Leif to the first unit of our monitor, which we called cot watch, like watching the baby's bed, went to the first couple who decided to monitor their newborn baby's breathing. We instructed all parents who used our monitor, and by the way, cot watch was a non-touch medical technology, meaning the sensor pad went under the mattress and the baby could roll all over the bed and its breathing would be monitored. So quite ahead of its time equipment. Within about 2 months of monitoring, practically all parents reported alarms. I didn't know then about the controversy surrounding vaccination, so we asked our local pediatrician, what happens to babies at 2 months of age? And he said, they are immunized. Vaccination. Well, we issued parents with forms to record all alarms, date, short story, what happened before, etc. And of course, all those babies were vaccinated. Now, when we realized that vaccines are a major problem here, Leif developed a computerized monitor, computerized cot watch, and we started showing pediatricians computer printouts of babies breathing. And so we established a lot of things that had never been seen before. The main thing is we discovered and established the dynamics of stress response. Because when a baby is exposed to vaccines or other stressors, it will affect their breathing, but it will not be a straight line of increasing stress in breathing. It was up and down dynamics, which means to me as a scientist, it showed that there is the existence of critical days. So the first most important critical day was day 2 after vaccination, 48 hours. Then the stress level went down and started increasing between 5 and 7 days. The stress level went down and started increasing towards the 16th day. Very clear clustering and clocking of the alarms. When you see that, anybody would say this indicates the causal link. This is the evidence of the causal link between the administered vaccines and what happened to the breathing of babies. I even had a meeting with an epidemiologist from the health department in Sydney. First, he looked at me like whether he should talk to me at all. So I put one of our graphs in front of him. He looked at it, said, this is science, let's talk. And initially, you know, in 1980s, that was a different generation of people and medical doctors and officials. They were still unblemished and uninfluenced by medical politics. So they openly admitted they recognized that our findings are of great importance, and they actually supported us a lot. But you see, people get old, people die, there is a new generation of people, and you're almost like all your previous effort is wasted, because you have to start with new people from scratch. And of course, the medicine then started experiencing increased pressure from drug companies and politicized medicine. But even then, I must say that nobody ever seriously criticized my work, even though grudgingly they admit that I might be right. I was even invited to a pro-vaccination conference to present the results of data collection with microprocessor breathing monitor. And I must say that it was an international conference. Out of a total number about 300, practically everybody came to my talk. People were standing in aisles. And so they listened to me. But as I said, the situation has changed. Now, what changed with vaccines? That more and more vaccines are administered. When we started, babies were only given DPT vaccine, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, and polio vaccine. Today, within 6 months only 3 doses. Today they want basically babies to be vaccinated every day and with multiple vaccines. And another thing which people must be aware, that when you administer one vaccine like DPT, it will cause a lot of changes in the bacteria and other microorganisms. And so not only vaccines suppress the immune system, they actually don't immunize, they de-immunize, but they will cause changes in microbiota, and so new diseases start occurring. So HIB, Haemophilus influenzae vaccines are not catering to some natural disease, because the Haemophilus influenzae, whether A, B, or other types meningitis, is actually directly caused by previous vaccines with injections of other vaccines. So they started creating new diseases. So meningitis is not a natural disease. It doesn't occur without previous vaccination. Haemophilus influenzae B, serious infections are not natural diseases. They are the result of vaccination with other vaccines, injecting other vaccines. Polio is not a natural disease. It is actually, it used to be called provocation disease, meaning paralysis provoked by previous injections of other vaccines. And then, of course, I realized that I have to study medical literature. I started going to medical libraries. To this day, I accumulated, studied, and hopefully remembered more than 300,000 pages of medical papers. I had to extend my house to just house that library. It is a national treasure because I have things in it right from the beginning of vaccination. I don't start like other researchers in 1990s and ignore what was published before. I start from very first article on any subject, even published in 1800s, because you must go to the seminal original research. And because I am a scientist, I'm a researcher, my doctorate is in natural sciences, which is just about the widest qualifications you can get in European universities. Well, I don't shy away from anything. Anything that had the word vaccination or immunization in the title, I copied, studied, and put in appropriate place in my library.
Dr. Scheibner, can I ask a question? I want to back up a little tiny bit, because you explained to us how your data showed on certain days after vaccination this problem. But then later, the data seems to get messed up. And are you saying to us that when they went from a handful of vaccines to dozens of vaccines, it sort of masked the clarity of the data you had collected?
Oh, no, not at all. It just, you see, we stopped recording when Leif died. He died in 1994. So it was well before all those 20-odd vaccines started being pushed into babies. But it doesn't matter, because it would have still followed the response to these multiple vaccines, would just follow the dynamics of those critical days. Even post-operation, operation is a major insult to the body. It's a major injury with sharp objects. And the surgeons talk about beware of day 5 after the surgery, because usually they send people home on day 5 and they die. Because now, of course, now you know that it's the major episode of increased stress between 5 and 7 days. But doctors have one specialty, and they refuse to learn. I communicate with many doctors, and they sort of in unison are saying that doctors just don't listen. Doctors don't want to learn. And if a professional refuses to learn information and knowledge which is essential for the performance of their profession, it is actually a culpable offense. But they do it as a routine behavior. They just, they are not interested. Whatever they were taught at medical school, they end up with it and then go through life and wreak havoc in people's lives. And so
Absolutely.
vaccination...
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And vaccination, of course, became even more politicized and pushed. I mean, the motivation is the dollar, nothing else, because even veterinary surgeons told me, and some other doctors were saying that without vaccination they would be out of business. Not because vaccinations as such brings money, but animals and babies get ill from vaccination, and it means repeat business. I mean, all those ear infections, other respiratory tract infections, meningitis, chronic ill health, you name it. Okay, it's just follows. It's the trail of disaster that follows vaccines. And if a vet tells me that, you better believe it. You know, I call it, they are confessing on my shoulder. They wouldn't tell it this to others, but they tell me. And they even know very well the value of vitamin C, because I have one cat that was born with congenital cataract on one eye, and I am keeping it under control with vitamin C. And when I told the vet, he says, oh yes, we all know the value of vitamin C. And I usually ask, well, do you prescribe it then for other animals? No. Why not? Well, again, pharmaceutical industry fills the space with their deadly medications. And you see, again, ignorance breeding stupidity and disasters. Ignorance. Now,
It's not, if I may, if I may for 1 second, it's not quite ignorance. It may be ignorance on the part of the doctors, but it's absolute knowledgeable behavior on the part of the pharmaceutical industry and the part of the policymakers. And this corrupt science, which is what you're talking about, is so much of a problem that it quite literally is damaging and destroying the human genome. And therefore, we have convened a special symposium at the request of the Indian Academy of Social Sciences. This special symposium will take place electronically in your home, on your computer, and physically in Mysore, India, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It's called Reclaiming Science, Preventing and Reversing Genomicide, or the genetic destruction of the species. And it's precisely what you are talking about, Dr.
And
Scheibner,
folks,
precisely.
on your screen, you will see one of the links there. It says www.endgenomicidecongress.com. You can get information there. This is going to be in December, and we sure hope that Dr. Scheibner will be one of our presenters at a distance or in India, as the case may be. Over.
In India would be fun because we'd get to play together, but at a distance or in India, your information is most valuable. I interrupted you. Please go ahead, Dr. Scheib.
Well, I have to clarify the word ignorance. When we look at the beginning of vaccination, well, the ignorance means that people knew nothing about biology, nothing about immunology. What did Jenner know about immunology? Absolutely nothing. And so what they were doing was so primitive and so without any base in any knowledge that it boggles one mind. I mean, vaccination started with smallpox, and of course the trail of disasters caused by smallpox vaccine was enormous. Actually, that was the motivation between pronouncing smallpox eradicated. I'm putting the emphasis on the word pronounce, because they didn't claim to eradicate measles. A bulletin of World Health Organization that deals with so-called eradication of smallpox emphasizes that because the side effects and the problems caused by smallpox vaccination outweigh its benefits, its perceived benefits, the World Health Organization decided to pronounce it eradicated. So when you read medical literature, you can see the truth is totally different from what you usually see. You know, so they don't claim to eradicate it. They claim to pronounce it eradicated, and that's
Not
a
only
huge
that,
difference.
huge
Yeah,
difference.
that's right.
Not
Well,
only
that's the
that,
advantage of going to the very original publications
Yes.
about everything.
not only that, the diagnosis of smallpox was moved over and changed to the diagnosis of monkeypox. And the New England Journal of Medicine did a study of 511, I think it was, tissue samples and fluid samples of people who had died of monkeypox and discovered that what they had died of was smallpox. Now, I presented this in a paper that is available online if you go to tinyurl.com/Dr. Rima India paper, DRRIMA India paper. This and a lot more information. They proclaimed it eradicated because they changed the name. They did the same with polio in India. They proclaimed it eradicated because they changed the name from acute flaccid paralysis to non-polio acute flaccid paralysis and created.
Similar thing happened in South America, and I look at it with different eyes, because they also proclaimed polio eradicated, but they did it by changing the definition of polio. And so they also came with an idea that not all cases of paralysis are polio. So they may have a graph where they showed reported cases, and then what word did they use? The agreed upon cases, confirmed cases. And while you see on the graph ever increasing numbers of reported cases of poliomyelitis, you see the ever decreasing numbers of confirmed poliomyelitis, because they used a new definition of polio. The original definition of polio, a disease where paralysis resolves within 60 days, and this new definition they used in the Americas, mainly Brazil, etc., was a paralysis that persists for more than 60 days. And of course, only about 1% persists for more than 60 days. Well, that's how they eradicated the polio. So the polio still keeps occurring, but they would not cause it polio. The same thing as in India, where they came with vaccine-caused paralytic poliomyelitis, and then those that were not caused as a natural disease. And many countries pronounced eradication of polio on this basis. And my second look on it is that I call it a cry for help. So they are, a discerning and knowledgeable reader can see exactly what they did. They manipulated the whole thing, okay? But they hope that the knowledgeable and discerning reader will notice what they were doing, right? Read between the lines. So it's a very interesting situation. And also the poliomyelitis, for instance, in the United States. Now, at the beginning of 20th century, the United States encouraged enormous immigration of people from Europe. And of course, one photographer, New York photographer, who photographed the misery and squalor that these people lived in, as Europe was vomiting. So Europe was getting rid of uneducated, poor, useless people, okay? I mean, I'm saying it in inverted commas. So as they arrived in New York port on ships, being hungry, scurvy, tired, ill, whatever, they jabbed them with smallpox vaccine. They step off the ship and they are all jabbed with smallpox vaccine. And of course, particularly children became paralyzed, because every vaccine causes paralysis, no matter what it is. And that's the beginning of poliomyelitis in the United States. So it was not poliomyelitis as such, it was simply reaction, one of the prevalent reactions to the smallpox vaccine. And you can only read this if you go to the original older publications. And this was actually published by the statistics department of the health department in New York. but you normally don't even think about it, not even read about it. So
Right.
the whole idea of vaccination is a very murky, politicized and unscientific, totally untrue analysis of the real situation.
Absolutely. So you now study, lecture, write, disseminate, and hope that you're not flailing in the wind as you tell vaccine truth. Yes.
Well, raw carrot, you will not see me eating raw carrot anymore, but I am managing it well. It's well under control, and well, I have researched it. Doctors don't want to touch it. Even the doctors who are friendly with me, they just say, just do it yourself.
Yeah, but I'm saying in terms of vaccine truth, you are still a potent and powerful force. Yes.
And no, I am not relaxing from it. I study even more, analyze the right publications, etc., and I publish in reputable sources. Yes, that's right.
Yes. Dr. Veira Scheibner is a gold mine of direct information and correlative information, putting information together that other people either didn't put together or hope you won't notice the relationship of. Would you say that's true? Yeah.
It's true. Well, you can go to Zika virus, my favorite, right?
Oh.
So, Zika virus. Now, I went to the first publication about Zika virus, right? 1953. When they discovered it in the Zika jungle and in Africa. Well, that was 70 odd years ago. And it was a innocuous virus which only caused mild symptoms when a person was bitten by a mosquito carrying this Zika virus. And there were no cases of microcephaly reported in that rainforest, in people who lived in that rainforest, and inevitably pregnant women were bitten by this mosquito carrying Zika virus, right? So how come suddenly it appeared in Brazil? Wow.
Well, this sounds like
what happened was that, see, there is a world embarrassment and bird problem with whooping cough, pertussis, because younger and younger babies are getting whooping cough. Why? Because their mothers were vaccinated, and this is documented by medical research. I only study medical research, orthodox medical research published in medical journals. And so this research demonstrated that babies born to mothers who were vaccinated as children have no transplacentally transmitted immunity, which normally protects small babies up to age 2 from contracting any natural infectious disease. But so newborn babies are contracting whooping cough, and of course the vaccinators are panicking. So they came with another very ignorant idea, in the sense that they don't study literature on microcephaly. If they did, they would establish that actually microcephaly occurs after pregnant mothers were vaccinated with diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis vaccine. Okay, and it became unreported.
And let me add that the government of Brazil issued an edict stating that every woman who was pregnant must have the DTaP, the DTaP vaccine before 22 weeks of pregnancy. Now, this vaccine, like every other vaccine, has never been shown to be safe in pregnant women, for fetuses, for future reproductive health. Never.
That's right. Exactly. And so in due course, the appropriate number of months, right, when these women were given this DPT vaccine midway in pregnancy, of course, the thousands of babies started being born with microcephaly. Well, the World Health Organization panicked. Of course, they know that it was caused by vaccination, but they would not admit it. But they had to come with something outrageous, because the more outrageous, the easier people believe it. Zika virus. Now, how come a virus discovered 70 years ago, not spreading anywhere, suddenly occurs in exactly those areas where they vaccinated these pregnant mothers? Needless to say, it's the area with a lot of poor people. They didn't vaccinate rich people, rich pregnant mothers. They only vaccinated poor mothers. Now, how on earth can they persuade anybody with a healthy brain that the Zika virus jumped to Brazil, exactly to this area, and caused the outbreak of microcephaly? I mean, who do they really think that people are a monolith of morons to believe this? Yes, but many people are and believe it, particularly young people, very sadly. You know, they try to appear knowledgeable. You know, Zika virus, Zika virus, Zika virus. You know, there is television discussions and everybody talks about it as if they knew everything about it, while they don't know anything at all. Okay?
Well, what they know are lies. And oh,
No.
by the way, let me inject that or introject that there was a learned article recently that we put up on a news aggregation site called Open Source Truth, opensourcetruth.com, in which it was said that Zika virus actually causes late microcephaly. So if you're a grown-up and you get bitten by the virus, somehow or other, your brain and your skull shrinks. To which my response was, would you like to buy a bridge?
And yes, I see. Would you like to buy a bridge, like a facetious sort of thing, right?
Or maybe some Greek government bonds. All right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
and also another thing, when they panicked and stopped vaccinating, abruptly the outbreak of microcephaly stopped, right? Because if it was caused by Zika, it would have continued, you know. I mean, those people don't even read their own nonsense, okay? Because they believe that people are so stupid and believe everything and anything, right? So they started giving advice, you know. Then, of course, some doctors came with an idea that the Brazil Olympic Games should not happen, right? Well, then they panicked. Then the World Health Organization panicked even more. And they started advising people not to have sex, and it is such a farce that if it was not so harmful to people, it would be the best comedy that anybody ever came up with.
Let's
so
add
then
one
they
more
started
thing to
saying that actually the Zika virus is not dangerous, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
first it was dangerous.
Let's add one more thing to this. A tremendous increase in the
then
number.
they said it's not dangerous. Then they started publishing totally bogus papers as if they researched this and experimented with the Zika virus. Please, who do they want to fool? You know, but so I always say that people provide the evidence against themselves, best themselves. Well, they certainly did in this case.
Let's add to that one
Sam-
more thing, Dr. Rima. Let's add to that the serious increase in the use of abortion in South America. Women are being told, if you were at risk of having been bitten by a Zika mosquito, it would probably be a good idea for you to get an abortion. That, of course, abortions don't count as birth defects, and the abortion is a very good way to cover over the stats. The same thing is happening around Fukushima, where Japanese women are being told, well, your child might be deformed, it would be better to abort, which of course stops the child from being born with a birth defect due to the radiation, because the child is no longer a birth defect stat, but just an abortion stat.
Correct. Now, Sally Elkordy, who is running for mayor of New York on a vaccine-free New York platform.
I do vote for her.
Yes, I vote for her too. Sally is fleeing not the Zika vaccine. I'm sorry, not the Zika virus, not the Zika mosquito, but the Zika spray. And tomorrow night, her home is going to be doused with poison, specifically naled. an organophosphate poison to prevent people from being infected by Zika virus in order to prevent microcephaly, retardation, and other consequences of alleged consequences. Now, the naled that is going to be sprayed causes microcephaly, retardation, birth defects, and cancer. Yay! So, Sally, tell us about your bout with Zika toxins.
Well, all I can say is that I heard on the news that they were going to be spraying for Zika. When I heard a couple of months ago they were going to be spraying the wetlands, I remember when they sprayed for the West Nile virus, and all of these beautiful birds wound up on their backs dead. And I didn't, at the time, I didn't put it together that this spray was killing these birds. Somebody else brought that to my attention. Well, I kind of got involved with the people. When I reached out to you, Rima, last was when we were having gases sprayed in our subways. And you put together a petition on that, if you recall.
Yes, I do.
Yes, well, thank you very much for that. And it was interesting because someone brought this to my attention all the way from London, and I got back to him saying, well, funny that you knew about what was happening here from London. Let me now tell you from New York, they're going to be doing it in the tubes as well. Well, I reached out to absolutely everybody I could at every, but not realizing it was actually a Department of Defense operation. So I had reached out to the health committee of the city council and to the mayor and, nonstop. Well, I wound up getting involved with people who were concerned about spraying of the West Nile and of the gases. But when they announced this, and I heard they'd be spraying the wetlands, and I thought, oh, Lord, there are going to be a lot of dead animals, and I knew, of course, that was just step one. Step two was the real pests, us. And by the way, there's been a huge fish die-off close to Staten Island, which is one of the wetland areas they were spraying, by the way. An immense amount of fish are dead. And I don't know that it's correlated. I'm just saying this is what came to my attention today. But anyway, so I called my city council person, I guess for laughs, because they're like, they said, well, actually, our neighborhood is going to be sprayed tomorrow night. And I'm like, oh, great, and thinking I have to get out of town. I'm going to take my little dog, and my daughter's coming from D.C. to visit me. I'll be taking her and my son, and we will be relocating while they carpet bomb us with this from dusk till dawn. But anyway, I really wanted to talk about what it is that they are spraying. I had heard this woman had died in California, and I only knew her as someone who was very supportive of my very overt actions to stop vaccination. And I just want to say, all these groups, they wouldn't stand with me against this Zika spraying. I said, and I have an Operation Blue Sky NYC, a group against chemtrails. I've had 9 meetings. No one's ever shown up, So here I have all these networks of people who will do nothing, And as you see, when I'm standing on the steps of City Hall calling for a moratorium, I'm all by myself. I don't want to be all by myself, but by God, I am. When I go to meet with the director of International UNICEF, I say I'm coming with a delegation. I'm all by myself. I say I'm going to meet with the legislators and from the health committee. I'm coming with a delegation. I'm all by myself. Well, this moratorium has caught on. People want to stand with this banner. They want to stand in the place that they live. I have reached out to people. I have 30 states on board now. And each person is standing in front of basically, like I live in Brooklyn, I live in Queens, but I live in New York, so I stand in front of the Empire State Building, in front of the Brooklyn Bridge, so that people know where I'm standing. And I'm asking other people likewise to stand in the place where you live, but make it obvious where you do live, you know? Because if we've got 30 states on board, we want to see that where people are and that it is widespread. And because I'm not going international on anything. I could have called for an international moratorium, but I can't run an international operation. I'm good to run my own country, you know? So I'm reaching out to other people in other countries saying, this is calling for, and I like the fact that we're separate countries and separate cultures, and that when we visit one another, it's kind of like all the malls. Everything's got Starbucks and the Gap. You can be anywhere in the United States and you could be anywhere, you know, you could be everywhere.
You can be anywhere in the world.
Well,
And the malls and the Starbucks are the same.
Right. I'm just saying I like, you know, individual cultures. I enjoy that. And I enjoy visiting other cultures. So that's something I wish to foster. I don't see the whole thing with globalism. But anyway, so I'm saying to other countries, I go out to Australia and Ireland and England and South Africa, and I say, it says national. It doesn't say United States national. It just says national. Please adopt this. So I'm asking people in other country, and every time we get a picture, I ask everybody who's participating, share this picture. This is a visual petition to our fellow man. I have had a petition to Congress, 3 of them. One in 2009 that was brought about by my awakening to what was going on with vaccines. And when I came to find out what was going on, my sister having been severely mentally retarded, I started something called Vaccine Reality Tour. And I just basically wanted to stop the legislators who were introducing legislation to increase the number of vaccines, to get their constituents activated to push back and say, no, we don't want this. So we went all across New York State, and we were held out of 150 different localities, churches, veterans halls, theaters, nonprofit organizations. No one would let us speak. And guess who was speaking? Mothers, 2 mothers. One who is an autism mother whose child had a lot of intelligence and promise, and then, of course, was severely autistic after a vaccine, and another mother whose child was taken down severely by the Gardasil vaccine. So it was just 2 mothers who were explaining their child's behavior and intellect before and post vaccination. It was a simple thing, you know, and that's.
Well, if I may interject here.
Yes.
Another elaboration of the word ignorance, of course, is that the researchers, even now, are still developing vaccines, while they should know that when you inject anything, the only reaction is anaphylaxis and not prophylaxis. Now, how come those biologists and microbiologists, etc., still allow themselves to be involved in such unscientific activity? I mean, the only reaction, the only response that vaccines elicit is anaphylaxis, which is harmful immune response, also called sensitization, equals increased susceptibility to the targeted disease. This is what irks me, that supposedly educated people are lacking very basic, elementary knowledge and allow themselves to be involved in such useless and such unscientific activity. And because, or not knowing that all vaccines cause the same reactions, that the reactions to vaccines are characteristic but not specific to any one vaccine. So, for instance, recommended MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, as individual vaccines shows an unforgivable, totally elementary ignorance of very basic things. Another thing that they allowed these glorious vaccine researchers and developers, they didn't even look what was in those monkey kidneys. And it's elementary that if you have monkey kidneys, they will have monkey viruses, 40 of them. SV40 is the only one that was actually properly researched. And so they, of course, this SV40 and all those other monkey viruses are carcinogenic. They are causing cancer. And people believe, and doctors believe, when somebody told them that, of course, the companies producing polio vaccines, they took away that SV40 from the bruise of the vaccines. It is actually documented, published in year 2000 by a lawyer who wrote that in a court case involving one of the polio vaccine producers of polio vaccine, they under oath, their representatives admitted in court, we are talking in year 2000, that they can't guarantee that all their stocks are free of SV40. Now, they claim that, of course, the SV40 was taken out of polio vaccines in 1962 or 64, but how come then to this day, children and babies, small babies, are still developing those characteristic SV40 brain tumors? You know, people, this is the ignorance breeding stupidity which gets me, right?
Is it passed down from the mother? My question to you is it passed down from generation to generation? I know the anthrax.
It would be, but it is still passed on to children directly from continuously contaminated polio vaccines. So even their claim that since 1962 or 64, the polio vaccines don't contain SV40, it's patently, demonstrably untrue. Okay? And so they know what sort of knowledge, what sort of wisdom had those researchers and those doctors who still say these things. Well, their ignorance is sky high. And if they only read elementary information from medical papers, they would know at least some little percentage of what I know. And this is still continuing. Ignorance is governing the world. And we can go to any other area and you will find evidence of it. We allow ignorance to govern the world.
Well, Dr. Scheibner, I really have a burning question. What, like, for example, the anthrax vaccine, is the symptoms that the Gulf War veterans are exhibiting are being experienced by their children. My question is, which vaccines affect generation to generation in terms of, I mean, it could mutate into something else, I don't know. But what do we know goes from generation to generation, as does the anthrax vaccine, obviously?
Well, the Gulf War syndrome, actually, Lancet published an article, I think in 1997, where they admitted that the Gulf War syndrome was caused by those administered vaccines and medications. Now, of course, when you are injected something, it will get that substance, like anthrax vaccine, will get access to vital organs. And, of course, reproductive organs are vital organs. So, of course, directly through sperm, their wives were also damaged because the sperm contained those toxic substances. But the vaccines are still contaminated. So children, not only, you don't need a parent contaminated with anything, because the present vaccines are still contaminated by all sorts of things, not just the toxic substances, but so-called adventitious bacteria and viruses, microorganisms. There could be many more harmful organisms that they didn't even looked into. SV40 is the only of the monkey viruses that actually been properly researched. And so there is other things. And of course, we all know that vaccination is the number one cause of most, if not all, those modern ills of humanity. I mean, vaccines are not just destroying the genome, they are destroying individuals, they are destroying their internal organs, they are destroying people. And they are still talking how the life expectancy is increasing. No, when you read literature, you realize that all countries are, particularly the developed countries, where most of vaccination, of course, is happening, what remind me where I started, because I sort of left off.
We were talking about inherited ailments due to vaccines.
That's right, and those all modern ills of humanity. Now, of course, behavioral problems. It is even in product inserts. When you read product inserts, as I do, they are actually admitting all those things that they are denying, okay? They will tell you MMR vaccine doesn't cause autism. Yes, but it damages the bowel. And this is in the product insert. And the bowel is like a second brain. And of course, what damage happens to the bowel will affect the brain and vice versa. So they don't even read their own published information. They refuse even to acknowledge what they acknowledge. A product insert for one of the rabies and polio vaccine, it is Sanofi Pasteur Tripedia, actually has a special paragraph, serious reactions detected by post-marketing surveillance, and they list SIDS, autism, and a list of other serious reactions to their vaccine. So they admit that their vaccine causes autism. They admit that it causes SIDS. Now, how come nobody reads it other than me? And I'm saying it jocularly as a figure of speech, okay? Now, how come they don't even read their own stuff?
Well, I have to tell you, Dr. Scheibner and Dr. Rima and Ralph, embarking on this whole fighting the spraying of this damn Zika stuff it's just like, oh no, I have to start all over, like with this horrid vaccine fight. The science is all on our side. Why are we even having this conversation? And to talk to these people saying, oh, you're the only one who's complained, everyone else has thanked us. I'm like, get real, as if people are calling to thank you.
Get real, that's the right sentence. Get real, people. Use your own brain, use your own eyes. Don't you see the most obvious? Obviously not.
Yeah.
I met in the street a man who had this wide gait, he was walking like a duck. And I stopped him and I said, you have scurvy. You should take vitamin C. No, my doctor, he puts me on better and better painkillers. I said, those painkillers are not helping you. Take sodium ascorbate powder, non-acidic form of vitamin C. No, he wouldn't listen. So he listens to his doctor, who is basically killing him, okay, who is not helping him, and would not use your own brain and at least try something which is safe and has no side effects. He wouldn't even try it. Well, and see it all the time.
Well, I just feel so helpless here. I can't get through on any issue that really matters, and they all pertain to life and survival, all of them. And it's so frustrating. I'm thinking, yes, I'm getting out of my neighborhood. What about all the people who can't? And what about the people who I tell and blow it off? What do we do for them? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. They're here, they're coming, and they're lying to my face. I actually called my councilwoman's representative a liar. I said, please don't lie to me. It's bad enough as it is. I can't talk to the person. I have to go through 50 appointees to get to them. They're a low-level city employee, and I can't even talk to them.
Yep. So I don't have much hope for humanity.
Well, I hope we're wrong. I want to tell everybody out there, the one thing I've done that has made a tremendous difference in waking people up is with all the propaganda on television, I put my actions, my interviews, I put them on television, and I educate the grossly disinformed populace, and I
Excuse me,
recommend everyone do
Ralph.
this.
Excuse me, Ralph. There is some extraneous sound coming from your microphone.
There shouldn't
Okay.
be. That's
Okay.
odd.
Go ahead, Sally. I'm sorry.
Well, I just really wanted to tell people, having taken 50 completely different actions, the one that has worked like gangbusters is public access television here in the United States. You can only air locally. I can only reach Queens if I air it here. But everywhere, in every locality throughout the United States, I have 26-hour-long DVDs talking about completely different atrocities, all regarding vaccines. I can't believe, and there's so much I have yet to mention. I don't know if any of you have seen what I saw just yesterday, which is we are up to 14 recommended vaccines, 14 recommended doses of vaccines for pregnant women. The August 2016 CDC recommendation is 14 doses for pregnant women. How fast can they move?
Oh dear God. Could you send that to me, Sally? I've been focused on Bert and I haven't really looked at anything like that.
Within a day. And also in Australia, I saw an article saying they are chipping the public. Are you aware of this? I just saw this yesterday, Vera.
But you see, at least they say to everybody, you can reject it, okay? I actually recently went to the hospital because of that gastritis, just to have the tests. Every time they offered me something, they said, you don't have to take it. You don't have to take it. You don't have to have it, you see? And so I don't know whether they were just because they know me or whether it is their general practice, but they didn't force anything upon me. Nothing at all. And they were saying it. You don't have to take it. It's your choice.
As the nurse Sue Field, who started the pushback regarding the forced vaccination in New York State of the nurses, she said, at first they offered us luggage sets to take the flu shot. And then they offered us ice cream to take the flu shot. And then they offered us our jobs if we take the flu shot, and no job if you don't. And do you know how
that immediately brings us to the Advanced Vaccine Directive, the fact that you have a legally protected right. If you live in a country that has signed the Geneva Convention, which is 126 countries, you have a legally protected right to say no to any procedure, and that's called informed consent. And if you go to tinyurl.com/AVD card, that stands for Advanced Vaccine Directive, you will find out how to properly assert that right and have a wallet card in the diaper bag of the baby, the backpack of your kid in school, your wallet, your spouse's wallet or purse or whatever, your parents, to be able to say no, 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 and have legal standing in asserting it correctly, because if you don't assert it, the right to informed consent correctly, it is deemed waived, which means bye-bye right to informed consent. This is vastly important. And the Natural Solutions Foundation studied the law, studied the international law, and we realized that we could create an advanced vaccine directive card that allows anyone who doesn't want vaccines to opt out. And if they are vaccinated against their will, then they are victims of assault and battery. Ralph, would
And
you like
that and that has been the law for quite a while. I put on the screen an image of the cards and link. It's been a law in the United States for at least 100 years. There was a famous case, Schoenberger, in New York State in 1914, which held that it was assault and battery and malpractice for a doctor to engage in a medical intervention without informed consent. As recently as 2014, Supreme Court of the United States in Missouri versus McNeely held, and I quote, more or less, we have never wavered from our commitment that you have a privacy interest in preventing an agent of government from piercing the skin. So the law is clear, but you have to assert it to be protected.
Well, there is a natural pause in our meeting. So how about I remove myself, because we said quite a lot.
We said
And,
quite a lot. I'm sorry.
Quite a
I
lot,
would
and
I would
have to
rather
digest it. People
I
have
would
to
rather you
digest
not
it.
go. I would rather you not go. Vera, our guest is Vera Scheibner, along with Sally Elkordy. These are remarkable ladies who deal in science and the reality of politics. And Vera, I hope that you will be presenting either electronically or in person at the End Genomicide Congress that we will have. Okay,
Yes.
December 19th through 23rd, Mysore, India, or your desk with your computer. Dr. Scheibner, you are an international treasure, not a national treasure. And it's always such a joy. Yes, keep talking. You don't have to leave, you know.
Okay.
Don't have to leave.
Well, I enjoyed our little foursome very much, and we just have to hope that people wake up to the reality. So it's either learn or perish.
Yes, it is. It is. It's
indeed.
refuse. It's
right.
more than learn or perish. It's refuse or perish.
And refuse, learn, refuse, and or perish. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Dr. Scheibner. Sally, can you stay with us?
Yes, I'd love to. I'd like to tell you why I asked Dr. Scheibner to write the speech I gave at the National Vaccine Advisory Committee at the Department of Health and Human Services.
And can you make sure that you read it?
Well, I wanted Dr. Scheibner, if you would like to read it, that would be even better.
Yes, read it, please.
Oh,
meaning,
okay.
No, you read it, because.
Oh dear. Well,
yes.
let me just tell you why. It's important why. I had seen a young mother of an autistic child address the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee, and she made the most incredibly compelling statements to them. And her children got up and they spoke what it was like to be the sister and brother of this really out of control and suffering child, and how their lives were altered. It was really great. And then they had the camera on the people listening. They were yawning, looking at their watches, looking at the ceiling, and eventually she said, "Shame on you." And I was applauding, in my seat at that point. And I thought, even though I've interviewed over 300 parents, maybe 500, I don't know, I've been doing this for years, of vaccine-injured children, and I could have represented on their behalf completely brilliantly, because this is all I do. But nonetheless, I thought it will be wasted on people who are scientists. They tout themselves as scientists. They are scientists. I need the words of someone who is a scientist and speaks in their jargon. So when I got up to speak, and believe me, you would not believe the lengths to which they went to prevent me from speaking. It's almost unbelievable, so I don't even think I'll go there. It's so outlandish. Regardless, I did get there. I did get to speak, and I started by saying, I've come from New York. My name is Sally Elkordy, and I am neither a doctor nor a scientist. And they smiled, thinking that they could throw me in the garbage the way they had with that lovely autism mom. And I said, so instead I am here. I reached out to the best research scientist I know, and I told a lie. I said she'd only read 200,000 articles on...
No, 200,000 pages of articles.
Pages. Okay.
That's matter. Go on.
I meant to say 300,000. See, there's the lie. But anyway, the thing is, by the time I finished your credentials, I realized I could stack all 50 of these people, half of them in military uniform, by the way, on top of each other, and your credentials would exceed it. your research could exceed theirs. But it was really important for me to be able to represent and then to speak in this scientific jargon. And even though it's scientific, it is so understandable by all. Everyone can understand this. It's on my blog. So I will just direct you to brightfuture83.wordpress.com because
but let me say it is a perfectly beautiful piece, and I would appreciate it if either you or Dr. Veira Scheibner would read it.
Well, I just sent it to you, Dr. Scheibner. Can you look at your text? I did send it to you. All right. I'll have to go. I'm afraid of losing you on the radio show if I do that, but I'll find it. Hold on just a second, please. Give me a moment. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Here I go.
The joys of live radio.
This is a good point, folks, while that looking up is going on, to remind you all that this is the Dr. Rima Truth Reports, www.drrima, D-R-R-I-M-A, truthreports.com. And we are in the, last 45 minutes of today's program.
Now, let me add something while Sally is looking this up. In case you're worried about how to protect your immunity and your health, you don't need a vaccine. You don't need a vaccine. What you need is nanosilver, 10 parts per million. What you need is CBD, a profoundly anti-inflammatory material that your body makes for itself. And Dr. Rima does recommend those. In fact, we have our own brand of both nanosilver 10 parts per million and CBD products. And where can you find them? You can go to www.nsfmarketplace.com. And NSF, of course, stands for Natural Solutions Foundation. Sally, did you find it?
Yes, I did. Okay.
Great. Go for it.
So I introduced Dr. Veira Scheibner, having researched 200,000 resources from the medical and scientific community, and being a natural PhD in natural sciences, including biology and anatomy. And I will now proceed. Number one, all information on the ineffectiveness of any and all vaccines to prevent the targeted diseases and the seriousness and high level of reactions to any and all vaccines has been documented by medical research and published in reputable medical and scientific journals right from the beginning of mass vaccination programs. The only response and effect of any and all vaccines is anaphylaxis sensitization, a harmful immune response resulting in increased susceptibility of the vaccine recipients to the targeted diseases and also to related and unrelated bacterial and viral infections. There is no benefit whatsoever from vaccination. The term vaccine preventable is false advertising. The long-term deleterious vaccine effects are behind the modern diseases such as cancer, chronic ill health, immunoreactive, autoimmune, and immune disorders. Vaccines are contaminated by chemicals and biological. Is it biologicals or biological, Dr. Scheibner?
Biological.
Just biological. By chemicals and biological, which should never be injected into anything living. Animals suffer the same deleterious effects as humans. Deleterious effects of all and any vaccines are characteristic but not specific to any one vaccine. They are subject to the well-defined concept in medicine biology called the nonspecific stress syndrome. There are no better and no effective vaccines, and any further development of vaccines is futile and should be scrapped. All mass vaccination programs should be abandoned. Number 4. There is only one immunity, the natural immunity achieved by exposure to natural infectious diseases. As an example, having measles not only results in a lifelong solid immunity to measles, but also to cancer, asthma, and allergies, as published in medical research journals. Natural infectious diseases are beneficial by priming and maturing the immune system, and they also represent developmental milestones, which concluded her statement. And then I said, I call upon the National Vaccine Advisory Committee of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to recommend a national moratorium on vaccination.
Wonderful. Great.
Here,
Thank
here.
you.
It
Thank
is
you, Sally.
wonderful.
Well, what's
And
funny
She's
about
wonderful, isn't she?
that, but what's funny about
Unforgettable.
Vera, my friend, what's funny about it is I never said to Vera, I'm going to call for a national moratorium on vaccination. I just said, will you give me a 3 minutes and under to present with scientific jargon? I put no other parameters because she is about banning vaccines. She is about.
yes, Vera.
Well, the first step we need here in the United States is for us to make sure that the four leading candidates for president um, answer the question of how they feel, their position on vaccine choice. We've set up another one of those petition or action items, and this one is tinyurl.com/vax free choice. Again, on your screen, vax free choice, and it'll let you send an email to Donald Trump's campaign, Hillary Clinton's campaign, Gary Johnson's campaign, and Jill Stein's campaign, demanding that they come out publicly and state their position on vaccine choice.
Well, I know their position, and I want you to know, Vera, that I have sent this to Donald Trump asking him to call for a moratorium on vaccination. In regard to Jill Stein, we all know that Hillary has said within the past year and a half that the sky is blue, the sea is green, and vaccines work. So there you go. But
Gee, that's a scientific argument, isn't it?
yeah, well, Jill Stein.
Well,
Even better. She said the sky is blue, vaccines work, the science is settled, indicating that she does not understand that science is never settled. It only
That's a bad
unsettles.
science that is settled.
Exactly. It's called religion.
Yeah.
Well, I want to tell you about Dr. Jill Stein because I have always been in support of Cynthia McKinney for president because she is a truth teller. But Dr. Jill Stein I've been writing to ever since Cynthia McKinney has gone away and they've replaced her with this woman. So I wrote to her saying, well, you're a doctor. What is your position on vaccination? And then I started to send things to her to educate her. I only got responses of donate to the campaign, which was very impressive. Finally, somebody put her on the spot and said, do you believe that vaccines cause autism? She said, no. Period. Then she said, I work with the Physicians for Social Responsibility. Now, this is a George Soros-funded organization. Helen Caldicott, who speaks out about nuclear energy.
Radiation.
Yes, she also promotes vaccination. She's a pediatrician, and she promotes vaccination while she speaks out against radiation. And I sent a speech of hers for 45 minutes, in which case I think she may have exalted vaccines between 7 and 9 times. Every 5 to 10 minutes she would. And I sent it to Christina England to write an article about it.
I wonder whether Mrs. Clinton's granddaughter is vaccinated. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if she wasn't.
Of course she's not.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. The hypocrisy and the malfeasance of public office and of public utterance is simply staggering. These people are, if you will forgive me for using a non-scientific, non-political term, scum. Scum.
Sounds just right.
So what happened with Jill Stein? Did she ever respond?
Well,
and did you?
Well, what you concluded is that vaccines and autism are a ludicrous concocted issue, quote unquote.
What's the definition of insanity?
Sooner or later,
A changed perception of reality.
right?
That's the definition of insanity.
Remember, like Madame Lafarge in the French Revolution, what these people have said, because sooner or later, perhaps sooner rather than later, it will become obvious to all what has been happening, and these politicians need to be held up uh, for this position they're taking, which is condemning children and our entire species to grave danger.
And to genetic distortion and damage, genomicide.
Yeah, that's right. Well, how nice talking to you all and with you all. That's wonderful.
It is always a pleasure, Vera. Um, you are listening to four passionate people share their knowledge and their intensity and their commitment. And we need your commitment, your intensity, your knowledge, because yes, Sally Elkordy is passionate and brave. Yes, Vera Scheibner is passionate and brave. We at the Natural Solutions Foundation try our best to lead lead the fight in areas where people can actually take action. But we need your support. We need your energetic support by going to our Facebook page, which is Natural Solutions Foundation, and liking and sharing, by going to Open Source Truth and liking and sharing, taking our email blasts, which you get when you're on our email list, which is free at our website, Dr. Rima Truth Reports. You sign up and we send you the blast, and then you forward that. These are easy steps that require nothing more than the click of a mouse, which I call the freedom mouse. It's that powerful. And when we in our millions rise up, they step back every single time. Dr. Scheibner, is the situation getting better or worse? You have a long perspective on it.
Well, actually both. A little bit of both. Because there is an increasing number of aware parents. They are not terribly advertising it, okay, for their own protection and the protection of their unvaccinated children. But it is growing, yeah, it is growing, yeah. In a sort of a quiet, non-demonstrative way. And of course, I can't talk about any details, no. Yep. So parents have a lot of power. They have a lot of influence.
They have the right. They have the absolute right to refuse any and all medical interventions. This is a fundamental human rights issue.
It is in the Constitution here. It is actually in our Constitution.
Yes, we're aware of that. That hasn't stopped the Australian government, of course, from giving women the awful choice of having vaccine-free children or receiving public benefits so they can feed those children.
No, it's not like that. No, it is much milder actually. The vaccination is officially not mandatory in Australia. And the parents who don't vaccinate, they only will lose a very small part of tax rebate for childcare. It's very small. No, it's not. It's
we were hearing it was $16,000 per child.
No, not true. No.
Oh, wonderful.
No,
That's
not
wonderful.
true. It is so small that it doesn't matter.
That is great.
That's very interesting.
Unfortunately, in
But
California,
officially,
the
the
situation is
first
terrible.
sentence in that law is vaccination is not mandatory in Australia. Yeah.
No spoilers.
Very important. Of course, in
It's in the
California,
Constitution.
while it's not mandatory, your child can't go to public school or even private
Oh,
school
absolutely.
without being vaccinated. And so once again, people are being forced to choose between a public benefit, in that case of California, the right to a free public education guaranteed to them by the California Constitution, in return for surrendering their internationally supported right to informed consent.
No,
In
it
the United
is the
States, that's called
Yeah.
an unconstitutional condition, and ultimately
That's
it
right,
will
yeah.
be overturned.
Yeah.
Well,
So no, it's much better in Australia. I assure you. Yeah.
it's much worse.
Oh, I'm
in
so
I'll leave
glad
it
to
at
hear
that.
that.
It's
I'll
worse
leave
in
it at
New
that.
York City than both Australia and in California, because we have enacted it with not the state, the city, 8 million dense city. We have not enacted a law. that removes exemptions, but the religious exemptions are being rejected, and the medical exemptions are impossible to get. So it's as if we passed SB 277 in New York City, and we have no law to fight against because their kids are being knocked off one at a time.
Ralph, how would you approach that?
I think it's important for parents to assert their legal rights, but of course, they're going to need to have the resources to do that. We've seen in
Well, they're going to need
California
to have.
where they are
They're going to
litigating,
need.
and it's going to be a
They're
tough,
going to need
tough.
to have the. They're going to need to have the advanced vaccine directive card first and foremost, because without
Absolutely.
that, there is no proper assertion of your right of informed consent. And then they're going to have to stand strong and say, okay, you want to vaccinate me or my child, have at it. But understand that you and the lawyer and the president of this institution and everybody else in this institution in any way involved is guilty of assault, battery, civil and criminal acts, other similar civil and criminal acts.
And
So
there
if
is
you
no
really want to
statute of
do that,
limitations for crimes against humanity. And under the Nuremberg Code, there's no question that mass violations of informed consent are a crime against humanity.
Well, what about in the case of
most Americans,
in the case of a pandemic, we have pretty bad laws here in America, do we not?
Yes, we
Well,
do.
fortunately, so far, the World Health Organization failed to whip up any epidemic,
Right.
because it is absolutely laughable. All their swine flu and whatever flu epidemics never eventuated. So that's very interesting. People should notice that.
And in
you
fact,
have to
we should
feel
tell
very
our folks,
badly for
we
them.
should tell the folks
They
on
are
the radio
desperate.
station, we should tell you all that, that's very real. In 2009, if you may all recall, there was the second swine flu vaccine panic. The first one was in 1976. The vaccine in 1976 was so deadly that 400 people died, and because the drug companies were legally responsible, they stopped the vaccinations. Now, of course, under the new laws, they are not legally responsible, and vaccines continue no matter how much damage is being done. In 2009, the federal government bought up the entire vaccine production of 5 major vaccine companies for the swine flu vaccine, including a live flu version, a mist version. And the intent was, according to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to vaccinate everybody in the United States, starting with the volunteers. Now, there weren't enough shots to go around, so they were going to stretch the supply. They bought in addition to the $4 or $5 or $6 billion in vaccines, they bought $500 million worth of squalene, and they were going to admix the squalene in 90,000 places around the country. Grammar school cafeterias and the basements of town halls and pharmaceutical facilities like that. And that was going to stretch the supply, and everyone was going to be vaccinated. But guess what? Instead, millions of people sent messages to their state and federal representatives saying, we will not cooperate. And when it came time for them to offer these vaccines, for example, in Boston, the home city of vaccination, they said, only 50,000 shots available. You're going to have to line up the night before. And they had police lines, they had yellow ribbons, they had dogs. They were ready for hundreds of thousands of crazed people seeking the vaccine against zombieism. No, it didn't happen. Less than 500 people in the entire city of 500,000 showed up for the vaccines. Literally, people said, no, don't you dare. And there was no pandemic. Because as Dr. Scheibner told us earlier, it's the vaccine that chooses the pandemic strain and initiates the pandemic.
Well, I just want to say that nobody seems to know this, but when they were demanding that the healthcare workers get the shot, and all of a sudden there wasn't enough of it, there's a segment of history here that I was there for, and it was at the Manhattan Supreme Court. The judge had said, in terms of the nurse's case, okay, well, I want everyone to come back I want you to come back and bring the science. And then all of a sudden the nurses didn't have to take the shot. I don't think it had anything to do with supply and demand at all. Even
Not
though
in any way.
Exactly.
Right. And it was Judge Diamond who called for the science.
Now, where is Judge Diamond?
I don't know. I said, when's the next case? When are we bringing the science back? This is fabulous. And it just it just got dismissed. The nurses got off the hook. And in fact, who got off the hook was them.
Well, you see, they want us, as in all other things globalist, to feel small and powerless and overwhelmed. But when in fact we take our power into our hands, things change. And if we don't do that, things are going to change in the direction of our demise. Let's talk about depopulation and vaccines for a moment. Ladies?
Well, I would like to say that you have Veira Scheibner on, the world's foremost authority on SIDS. And when I had interviewed you last, Veira, you were saying that documents that dated back to 2009 showed that 10% of infants were dying from vaccination and 15% in Australia. And I would like to say since 2009, Australia has taken away the flu shot for under 5 years old, where in the USA, we've added it. So we're probably going to switch those numbers, but that's not 1 in 1,000 dying. That's 1 in 10.
That's a
And
very
eventually
difficult
1
number
in
to
2 will be
believe.
autistic as well.
Yes, eventually 1 in 2 surviving children will be autistic. And eventually, not long from now, according to WHO, children born in the year 2000 and later will be likely at the ratio of 1 in 2 to either experience cancer or die from cancer by their 18th birthday. And parents of children born in 2000 and later are statistically, according to WHO, more likely to outlive their children than we have ever seen in the history of humanity. This is a first. Parents will die
Folks, you need to
after their
read what we've been
children.
posting on this. General Burt, back in last November and back in February and then back in May, has written powerful information. The most recent one called "The Great Culling Has Begun," and it's linked from our most recent blog entry about General Burt's condition. The Great Culling has begun, and we need to be aware of that. And we need to be ready to defend our species and our children against what is essentially a demonic money-making system.
Well,
Yeah,
I would
that's
like
the word,
to suggest
demonic.
with this SIDS rate, with this sudden infant death syndrome rate currently, that great-grandparents are outliving their great-grandchildren.
Yep.
Silence.
Okay, my friends. So, if you don't mind, I will go and do some other things.
Well,
But
thank
I
you,
am
Doctor.
mulling in my head. I usually go over things that were said, and we said a hell of a lot of useful information.
We did. Thank you so
Mhm.
much. And what we will do is
And
send
thank you
you.
for inviting me.
Oh, a pleasure. Sally, thank you for reaching out to Veira. This
Oh, I
has been
love
absolutely
speaking
wonderful.
with Veira Scheibner. I look for excuses to speak with her.
Yes, you really should. Everyone should. Veira, I don't think they should bronze you, but they should certainly celebrate you in some massive way because you are so important to what we understand. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
the best.
Thank you. Sally, tell
Yes,
us about your campaign for governor.
Oh, actually, I'm running for mayor now.
For mayor, I beg your
Well,
pardon.
I've run for governor twice. I've actually run for governor twice to create new political parties. The first one was the Women's Party, and then I had so many men helping me get signatures that I created the Peace Party. It was, in fact, a movement for peace. Now that I realize that the war is on our children and the weapons are vaccines, I have just focused completely on vaccination. But I know this whole Zika madness is leading to vaccination. So many issues are relevant to vaccination.
And I promise you, by the way, Sally, that vaccine, which is in the works for Zika, is not going to be safety tested. And it's not going to be, of course, efficacy tested. And it will cause
because we've got an emergency. Ooh, 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 ooh,
right,
ooh.
exactly why I was asking about the pandemic laws, because this has everything to do with what's already been in place, I guess, since 9/11.
Well, let's go back again to what happened in 2009 with the swine flu panic. It was very clear what the government was up to, and Sebelius, the head of HHS, said in describing to Congress the intention to use the squalene, which, by the way, causes irreversible infertility, the intent to use the squalene, she said, we can't use it yet because our own scientists won't sign off on its use. And so we can't use it unless there's a national health emergency. Well, of course, within a week, the occupant of the White House signed a national health emergency. So much for change and hope, right? And they were ready, as I said, to admix this dangerous chemical into all of these hundreds of millions of vaccine doses, somehow expecting that not to be a disaster. Unintended consequences or intended consequences. Dr. Rima, what is the effect on fertility of injecting squalene into human bodies?
Well, the United States government holds at least 2 patents on the injection of squalene to cause permanent, irreversible infertility and sterility. And it just so happens that the amount of squalene in those patents, the dose in those patents, is just exactly the dose of squalene that they were planning on admixing at each of the 90,000 sites around the country, admixing and injecting along with supposedly something for your health, injecting that into every man, woman, and child in the United States.
Well, I know a 15-year-old kid who went to a pregnancy lineup to get the H1N1 flu shot. And he handed out literature to each and every person on that line. Eventually, he was driven away by security. But a lot of those girls walked off of that line. And I just want to say that kind of grassroots effort is required by absolutely every single person who's awake. If you get it, you may not sit on the sidelines. This is humanity in the balance. World War III, as my friend Jeff Reed says, is behind every pediatrician's door all over the world. When I look up at the stars and I see 1 million in the sky, I think, and that's how many kids are going to be damaged by tomorrow. And that is how many kids are going to be damaged by tomorrow. As many stars as you can see in the sky, that many kids.
This is terrifying, terrifying, terrifying. But what we can do is say no, 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 and assert that right properly, because if you don't assert it properly, they just steamroller you. And that's what the Advanced Vaccine Directive Card is for. And I can't take that call right now. That's what the Advanced Vaccine Directive Card is for. And then the other thing you need to do is share this information to create a groundswell of opposition. A groundswell.
Right. Well, your website is wonderful. Congratulations to both you, Rima, and to Ralph as well. What a great read, terrific videos. I really had a wonderful time just touring your website, you know? I
Thank
learned
you.
a lot. Well, great statistics. The white men, the General Burt is credited with your what you read on white men are dying or something like that. White men's life expectancy is
Right.
limited or
It's that
something.
one cohort, the cohort of 45 to 55-year-olds who are literally not gaining longevity on their parents. The first time in 150 years, I guess, since the end of the Civil War, that a cohort has not lived longer than its parents, not gained, rather, living longer than its parents. And the cohort behind that, the 35 to 45-year-olds, are, well, they're not losing ground yet, but they're not gaining it either. And the one before that, Dr. Rima was explaining earlier how what type of diseases they're likely to encounter during their shortened lives.
There's a spot of good news and then a couple of bad things I'd like to let the audience know about. The spot of good news is I understand police are now asking when an infant dies, was the child recently vaccinated? I've heard that. I haven't obviously witnessed it, but this is great news. Great news.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great news. But bad news is that the Senate passed a bill to draft women into the armed forces, and anybody who's ever served in the armed forces will back me up when I say that puts the kibosh on any fertility left in the young women today, because they're going to be vaccinated so many times.
This
And
is true.
yeah. And another thing is, and this sometimes, I try to spread it around so we draw in as many people to this conversation as possible. And that is S1203, which would require veterans to receive.
Yes.
And also there is
I interrupted you. S1230 would require veterans to receive all recommended or approved vaccines. Currently, there are 90.
Well, there's 90. That's right. I want to pull something else out here. It's 1203. It is the fact, and I poked around that bill for quite some time to find out that they're basically going to keep records of everything, of the veterans' vaccinations, the family members of the veterans, the family members of the family members, and if you have a certain percentage which is ill-defined in your community, then they'll be tracking everyone in the community's vaccine records. That's in that bill.
This is clearly another step forward towards what can only be described as medical tyranny. And of course, the only way to stop it is for people to really raise the hue and cry. And I urge everyone to go to tinyurl.com/vax-free-choice. It's really important that we make sure that these candidates for president address this issue.
It is urgently important because these people purport to represent us, and they could represent us into an infertile grave.
Well,
Sally, thank you so much for being our guest here on the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. My co-host, as always, Ralph Fusatola, JD, thank you. These conversations are enlightening, enlivening, and very important. Please, when you go to the archive on youtube.com or that's the only way, right? When you go to the archive on youtube.com, share the link, share it with other people, open their minds, open their hearts, open their eyes, save them too.
thanks again. I appreciate your having me on.
Our
It
pleasure.
was delightful. Thank you.
Now, folks, there is a website that we always have links for our radio programs and our archives, and that is our healthfreedomportal.org, healthfreedomportal.org. Now, Doctor, although it's nearly the end of the hour, because we began recording late, and this is folks, a pre-recorded live stream, because as we noted earlier, Sally Elkordy has to flee her home because of the spraying that's happening tomorrow when our radio program normally happens. We actually had 15 more minutes or 10 more minutes if you want to talk further, or one of the joys of live streaming is we can end it whenever you want.
Well, I will tell people that October is Vaccine Injury Awareness Month. We kicked off the moratorium. Now that I started back in 2000. I just want to tell people in terms of my history, 2009, I saw something on a Dr. Leibow's healthfreedomusa.com website of I don't know if that's still up and running, but it was about an assemblyman and a state senator here in New York who had proposed 70 vaccines through the age of 18 for girls, I believe, and 67 for boys. And I remember thinking, oh, this is ridiculous now that I know that they're causing, children to become my sister, which was always my dream, was to have normal children. So it's my dream for everybody. It's not just my dream, but as a child, it was just my dream that my kids would be normal. I had no idea it was caused by vaccination. So I saw this bill on your old website, and I said, that does it. I can't believe a legislator would have the blazing gall to recommend 70 doses of vaccines through the age of 18. And now the latest one I just saw is up to 76 with a plus next to it. And the 76 includes the additional meningitis, which if you look at the CDC's Pink Book, you'll see the 2 new meningitises as of 2015 contain E. coli. They took out thimerosal, they took out aluminum, but they put an E. coli in one, E. coli and polysorbate 80 in the other. So I am absolutely paralyzed for our children with fear. I really am. I don't want to even know what happens at the beginning of this session of school. I really don't. However,
But we need to be the people who keep the records. We the people who know what the politicians are saying, and we need to be the people who are going to be able to say, look what you've done. Look what you've done.
Yeah, well, it's not going to take long. If they literally have to have this before they can enter 7th and 12th grades, I believe we are going to see not infants, which are seem to be able to be kept a well secret, but older children falling in mass. Now, I don't know which of the 5 meningitis vaccines are the ones that are being mandated, but to know and to present to the legislators, to the governor, and have it signed off on. The only objection to that increase came in the fact that a state-level senator took $420,000, and it would cost the taxpayers $200 million. What about the E. coli? Anybody want to protest that? No. I mean, so anyway, so that would make it 76, and then I just saw this 14 doses in pregnancy when in
This
days
is beyond insane. Insane.
So over the top. But I don't even remember where I was going with this. But anyway, so the first bill was all vaccines are banned because it was so out of control at 70. And as I say, now we're up to 76 plus. Okay. So the second one was ban vaccines 2013, which was, by then I knew all the ingredients, all the diseases, which are all diseases in internal medicine, and Lucia Tomljenovic had come out with that Freedom of Information Act, which really proved intent. I also had 3 other parts of intent, but that was so rich in intent on so many different levels. And I thought, well, there's just no stopping us now. Well, if they don't ever admit anything, if all they want to do is talk about that English doctor who was proven to be wrong. I mean,
Wakefield.
My congressperson writes to me about Wakefield. Are you kidding? I'm like, I've had legislation long before you were ever my congressperson. Please don't talk to me about Wakefield. I didn't even know who he was for my first bill. He wasn't even in my eye at all. So I'm just like, listen, man, this is these old, tired lies they keep dragging out. And as Dill Bigtree says, it's a one-trick pony. You say vaccines are poison, they say Wakefield. You say vaccines are causing all diseases, and they say Wakefield. No matter what you say, they say Wakefield.
So the sad part about that, Sally, is that Dr. Wakefield was absolutely correct. He never said that vaccines cause autism. He said that a vaccine adverse reaction has to do with the gastrointestinal system, and once that reaction happens, some people experience autism. So,
Right, but
he's been
Vera
vindicated.
pointed out,
It turns
as
out
Vera
that
pointed out, separating the shots, though, they're recommending separating the shots at the end of it. And as Vera pointed out, you don't completely understand what you're talking about if that's your recommendation at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So, as Vera said, to repeat, there are no safe vaccines. There are no safe schedules. There is no way to make them safer. You cannot cure or prevent disease by injecting pus and poison.
Indeed, the courts have held repeatedly that vaccines are unavoidably unsafe, and the insurance industry, the arbiters of risk in our society, have said that vaccination, by the way, along with nuclear power, are uninsurable risks and could not exist in our market society without special government privilege. So vaccination benefits from a special government monopoly. They get monopoly profits. They are not liable for the damages they cause. And we wonder why vaccines are less and less safe and the
There
adverse
is one
reactions
other
greater and greater.
there is one other industry that is unavoidably unsafe and therefore uninsurable, and that is the nuclear reactor industry.
Right, three things: acts of God, nuclear reactor, and vaccination. Those are the three things that are uninsurable, right?
Right.
And everything
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
Well,
Interesting.
I guess vaccination is a new act of God,
is.
or at least when you take a look at people like Dr. Offit, the prophet, they are an act of great profit for these individuals who will do anything to keep the money rolling, even destroy
Depends who the
the future
god
of our
is.
species.
Moloch. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's it.
Well,
That's it.
I'd like to share a joke. I'd like to share a joke that I used to produce comedy shows in hospitals and homeless shelters, and this one got me kicked out of Sloan Kettering. Are you ready? It's what's the difference between a doctor and God?
What is?
God doesn't think he's a doctor.
Oh, you have to tell excuse me, you have to tell us the story of what happened after you told that joke.
Well, all I know is, that I'm sure they would have let me back in. I don't remember the place exploding, needless to say. But you don't disrespect doctors when you're making people laugh. So I don't remember exactly what happened. Normally, it was Professor Irwin Corey who got me kicked out of every single place we'd go. These are places that had no. Oh, oh my God, he's been telling the truth for years. He has been telling the truth for years, and I thought all of it was a joke. And now I look back, and every single thing he said was like the roadmap to what's all unfolding. And everyone thought it was a joke. So this man, whoa, he is beyond belief. When in retrospect, at the time he was just hilarious. In retrospect, he's a genius.
Well, there was a famous and a great Sufi master called Nasudrian, and he only taught in jokes. So perhaps we have a new Sufi master.
Right. Well, it was very clever. Just clever beyond word. But I was a big Henny Youngman fan and a big George Carlin fan and Carol Channing and Celeste Holm came with me to homeless shelters that I could not have gotten into.
Oh, wow.
If I didn't have a star. And I'd say to her, there's something wrong in this shelter. The women are glaring at us in complete silence, no matter how great the acts are. I've got to get back in there, and you got to help me. And she would, and they couldn't keep her out. I mean, she'd come and she'd regale stories of Frank Sinatra and Betty Davis and you name it, Bing Crosby. So she was a big deal. And then she'd be going on afterwards to address a very posh group. I mean, very hoi polloi and what have you. But meanwhile, she gave these women 45 minutes of her time and the other, well, anyway, it gave me an opportunity to get in and distribute information it became a social service. It was just meant to cheer people up. Now I'm on a mission of mercy. I was on a mission of cheer. This and all three of us are on a mission of mercy.
Amen to that. And Dr. Rima, we're now reaching the end. We have about 10 seconds. Take us on out.
www.drrematruthreports. Sign up for our free e-newsletter. Be there. Take action. Stop them from killing us. Thank you, Sally, for being our guest.
My best to General Burt.
Thank you.